Hey, it's me, ezzB, and today we are doing a different kind of video. A guildmate of mine asked if I would do a video on some of the math in Summoner's War. I don't know why they asked me to do it. I am not a math guy, but I'm going to try. So I think there are three areas of the game where knowing how the game uses the underlying math is very helpful. The first area is just around how time works in Summoner's War and speed mechanics. The second area is how is damage calculated. And then the third area, which is actually the easiest, so I mean, if I was smart, we would probably start there, but we're not going to, is just how the resistance mechanic works. We are, as I said, we're not going to start with the resistance because it's actually not that important, or it's not as important as the other two. So we are going to start with speed first. Why I think speed is the most important mechanic in the game to understand is because speed is the most important stat on monsters, and I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. I think a lot of people would agree with that. I think that's reflected in how people talk about it, how people give advice on how to build units, and you know, who is successful in PvP content and PvE as well, actually. And the reason why speed is the most important mechanic is because it really limits you in a way that you can't overcome with other stats. So no matter how much resistance you have on a monster, no matter how much HP, no matter how much attack, no matter how much defense, no matter how much crit rate or crit damage or accuracy, if your speed isn't sufficient for the area of the game that you are playing in, you just won't get the results that you want. And what I'm starting to realize with myself is that monsters that I thought I couldn't use, it turns out that they are usable as long as they have the right speed and they're being used in the right teams with the right sort of team speeds. So each monster in the team has the speed in the right place. In particular, and this is a term that everybody I'm sure has heard of, which is speed tuning, so we will get into what that is as well. But one thing that I think makes it difficult to understand how the speed mechanic works in Summoner's War is the fact that time works in a bit of a counterintuitive way in Summoner's War, the world of Summoner's War, versus how time moves in our world, right? So in our world, time constantly moves forward in one direction, and although, you know, if you're traveling if something is moving at very high speeds, then, you know, time is relative, but basically at the speed in which we live our lives, time moves forward continuously, and essentially at the same rate, you know, more or less, and there are no breaks in that time. It's always running. Summoner's War, it doesn't work that way. Summoner's War, what happens is that the concept of time, which is sort of denoted as ticks, that only happens when nothing else is happening in the game. So time happens, but no actions occur during the movement of time, and then time stops, and then what we see as the actions, the things that we actually see taking place, so the taking of turns, and all of the actions that go along with that, attacking, buffing, debuffing, boosting attack bars, decreasing attack bars, that all happens while the time and the tick mechanic are like essentially on pause. So it's almost like one of those super old Saved by the Bells, if anyone remembers watching it, like with Zach Morris, where, you know, something's happening in a scene and he's like, you know, time out, and everybody freezes, and he like addresses the camera, you know, while no one else is moving. That's kind of how like Summoner's War is. It's like time's moving, but then every once in a while a monster gets to go timeout, and they get to do something while everybody else is frozen. So in order to understand how this works in a more concrete way, I have set up a bit of a visual. Unfortunately, the way that ticks occur in the game, there's no visual cues to show us as players how many ticks have occurred before our monster gets to take a turn, or how many ticks in total there has been in a game or anything like that. And the problem is that the computer calculates things so fast that it seems like there's anything that we can observe in between one tick to another. So as long as a monster doesn't take a turn, we can't tell whether it's been like one tick or a million ticks, right? Because it all happens like within fractions of a second. So in order to figure out how our monsters are going to act in this world of Summoner's War and in this time frame, we need to know what is the total speed of a monster. And so in order to do that, I have just mocked up a very simple Excel spreadsheet with, I think, all the speed calculations factored in. There may be something that I'm forgetting, but if there is something I'm forgetting, it will probably be calculated in a similar way of how these other speed mechanics are calculated. So the first thing you need to know is the base speed of your monster. Again, that's going to be super easy to find, and I'm guessing all of you know how to find it, but just in case you don't, you just go into your monster box and you look at the info, and you will see your base speed, and it is listed right there. That is the base speed of the monster, and then the number right beside it with the plus is the bonus that you are going to get from your rune stats. So the white number is fixed to the monster, and as far as the mechanics of the game are laid out currently, there is no way to change that stat. There are often you get like a one speed bonus when you awaken a monster versus the unawakened unit. Occasionally there are a few monsters that get quite a big boost, like maybe even 10 or 15 extra speed when they're awakened. But the unawakened speed is fixed and the awakened speed is fixed, and as of now in Summoner's War, there is no mechanic for which that for that to change. The second unit beside it in the plus, the green number, that's all of the bonuses that you are getting from your base stats, and that includes the bonuses that you are getting from your Swift set. So it's going to include if you have a benefit from having a Swift set on it, and that's also going to include if you have a slot 2 speed or any substats in speed substats in any one of these other runes, which I'm probably telling everybody everything that they know and over explaining, but I want this to be as accessible as possible for anybody in the game at any level. So we have our base speed, and we have our rune stats. The other thing that we need to know is what we are getting from our tower and what we are getting from our artifacts. Again, go into your monster. You can go into the rune manager and select the artifact version, and it's just going to tell you right there. So I'm getting 27 speed. It's also like super easy just to click on the individual artifacts themselves and see that there's a speed increasing effect and a speed increasing effect. But yeah, in case you don't want to do that math, you have it right there. All you need to do is you just need to take that number and times it by your base speed, and that will give you the bonus. that you're getting from your artifacts. Next thing to calculate is your tower speed. The tower speeds are all here, so if you know what your tower level currently is, then just use the appropriate multiplier. In the game, again, super easy to know what your tower speed is. You can just go to your shop, into your glory, find your Sky Tribe totem, and it's going to tell you right there what your total speed is. So super easy to calculate that as well. I just did a little drop down menu. So if I had 0 speed in my speed towers, then I would be getting this 0 bonus, right? If I had level 5, then I would be getting just under 8 speed. Level 10, meaning I get 15. So that is basically it. We have our rune stat bonus, we have our artifact bonus, we have our tower bonus, and the tower bonus and the rune artifacts are calculated off of our base speed. So what we end up with, the last thing is if you have a speed leader. So in this 4-person team, I do not have a speed leader, but let's say I had a Vanessa in there, then theoretically I could have this 33% speed lead, and so this would increase my Bastet's speed by just under 33 speed. But I don't. In this comp that we're dealing with today, I have a Lauren, and so my speed lead is going to be 0. So that's one thing you're going to want to factor into your calculations. You probably, if you're running a team that works with a speed lead and without, so for instance, in my arena, I am actually using a version of this team, Bastet, Konamiya, and Lucian. Sometimes I use it with Alicia to get the attack power lead, and then sometimes I run it with the Vanessa if I feel like I need the speed lead. So if I was doing this to actually speed tune all of these units in the right manner, then I would want to test it with both the speed lead and without the speed lead. And so once you have your total speed, I know that was like a lot, but that's how you have to calculate your total speed. Once you've done that, then you can calculate the tick speed. And the tick speed is really important because that is going to be to tell you how much of your attack bar moves in the process of moving from one tick to another tick. So when time starts in Summoner's War, how much attack bar you gain until time stops and the computer takes a moment to think about life and whether it wants to allow anything else to happen. To get your tick speed, it's very simple. It's just 7% of what this total speed is. The one thing that I'm not sure about in the game is actually how the mechanics do the rounding. I don't know whether everything is rounded up, whether it's rounded up like at this point and this point and this point and then add it all together, or whether it adds those at how many decimal spots and then adds them together. I don't know. So that potentially could change your speeds by 1 or 2, but it's probably moving most of your units in the same direction, right? It's probably either increasing all your units by a couple of speeds or decreasing them by a couple of speeds or just kind of leaving them alone. So Bastet is every tick, it's going to gain 22.3% roughly of its attack bar, which means that it will get to 100% attack bar in 4.48 ticks. However, no monster can take a turn during a tick. It can only take a turn at the end of a tick before a new tick starts. So what this means is whatever your however many ticks it takes to get a full attack bar, if that is anything over a round number, like it means it's going to go up to the next one. So if I'm able to take turns in, say, like 4.00000001 ticks, it means I'm not getting a turn until the 5th tick. So this is what I have happening here. So in this game, even though I wouldn't see the 1, 2, 3, 4 ticks go by, it would get to the 5th tick, and my Bastet would have 111.5 in its attack bar. So even though visually the attack bar stops at 100, the behind the scenes mechanic actually keeps going infinitely. Now what's interesting here is we notice that my Konamiya takes a turn, reaches 100% at 6.14 ticks, and Lauren takes a turn at 6.31 ticks, which means either one of these monsters potentially could take a turn at the 7th tick. However, the other strange mechanic in Summoner's War is that only one monster can take a turn per tick. So in this case, because my Lauren will have a higher attack bar because it'll take 7 turns, so I just take their this times this, and this times that. So at the start of the 7th, so when the 7th tick occurs, Lauren will be at 114 attack bar, Konamiya will be at 114 attack bar, and Lauren will only be at 111 attack bar. So Konamiya will actually go, and Lauren will have to wait until the 8th tick for that opportunity to take a turn, at which point Lauren's attack bar will actually have an increase to 126 or 126, 127 attack bar. So even though visually it looks like your attack bar stops at 100, in reality it keeps going and going and going infinitely until such time you take a turn, at which point it is reset to 0. So in order to help us understand this, I'm going to try and do a visualization of what happens. So if we could stop Summoner's War, so this math at the bottom you don't need to worry about. This is just for me to show where to put them visually. So if we could figure a way to pause the game after each tick, and see where a monster's attack bar are, this is what we would see. So turn 1, Bastet is going to be at 22, 16, 15, 10. 22, 16, 15, and just under 10. So what happens is one tick goes. All of these monsters, their attack bar are all filled up, corresponding to where their picture currently is, and the computer pauses a second and says to itself, are there any monsters over here in this plus 100 attack bar range? If yes, the monster that has the most attack bar gets to take a turn, and all of the monsters will have to wait for the next turn opportunity after the next subsequent tick. So nothing happens, we go to tick 2, and because nothing happened that affected their attack bars will actually just be equal to what they were at the end of the last tick, right? So your attack bar at the end of tick 1 is going to be your attack bar at the start of tick 2. So tick 2 starts, and Bastet moves to 44, 32, 31. And I'm guessing Lucian is like just under 20, just like that. And again, it's going to go over and the computer's going to say, hey, does anybody have, plus 100 attack bar? Nope, I'm not seeing anybody there. Okay, let's go to the next tick. So again, because there was no attack bar manipulation or turns in between when tick 2 ended and before tick 3 started, then everyone's attack bar at the end of tick 2 is going to be where it starts at tick 3. So that pause button is now, the play is pushed, and now Bastet goes to 66.9. 48, 47, and like probably 20 something, right? Yeah, 29. Okay. Again, no surprise, right? We've gone our tick. Their attack bars have moves. The computer now says pause, and let's take stocks, find out where everything is. We find out that there's nothing in here. No monsters have yet, at least on my team, have yet made it into this attack bar range. Again, we'd be fighting enemies, and they would be doing the same thing. Maybe they're in here. If they are, then they would take a turn. But yeah, nothing happens. So again, nothing happened in tick 3. There were no turns to be awarded, and so everybody's attack bar at the start of tick 4 is the same as tick 5. And then during the course of tick 4, my Bastet now goes to, what was it, 89. So now we're getting pretty close. This was, I think, 65 something, 64 something, and our sad little Lucian is at 39 something. So all of these attack bars would move synchronously, like all together. I'm obviously just manipulating them one by one because that's the only way to do it really easily. Again, the computer is going to check, are there any monsters in this take a turn zone? No, there is not. So again, nothing has happened to the attack bars during the space between the one tick and the next. And so now we are during the time period from moving from tick 4 to tick 5. Bastet crosses the finish line and is at 111. And we have Lauren and Konamiya around the 80 mark, one just a little bit above, one just a little bit behind, and our laggardly Lucian is only at 49. So all of this like very slow incremental moving all happens what appears to be seamlessly, and that actually like nothing happens, right? So all of those ticks, every time the computer paused time and said, is anybody over here in this green area of above 100% attack bar? No. Okay, let's do another tick. Is anybody there? No, let's do it. We can't see that. It's imperceptible to us, the user, but it is actually happening. So here's where things get fun and interesting. Our Bastet now has 110 roughly attack bar. So the computer says, is anybody in this green zone? Okay, aha, yes, we have a Bastet. Our Bastet would be forced to reset all the way back to 0. As long as Bastet used skill 1 or skill 2, this is what would happen, and nothing would happen to anybody else, which means that in the next turn, everybody would just gain their attack bar per normal, and what we would find is that no one else actually makes it into this attack bar yet, which means it would have to go over one more tick. But of course, that's not how, typically, especially if we're trying to do speed tuning and taking turn 1 and killing things, that's not how we're going to use our Bastet, right? So what we're going to do is, our Bastet is going to use skill 3 in order to increase everybody's attack bar 25%. So what happens is Bastet goes to 0, increases their attack bar to 25%, and all of the other monsters immediately get that boost. Konamiya is at 106, and our Lauren is at 105, and our Lucian is at just under 65. So, as long as the opponent's monsters, none of their attack bars were were greater than Konamiya's, Konamiya takes the next turn. Now, one mechanic that I've tested out is the Resurge on Konamiya. So Resurge fills up an ally's attack bar and strengthens their attack power for 1 turn. So looking at this, the way that it's written, how it is implied to me, is that what it would do is that no matter where the unit was along their attack bar, Konamiya would place them at exactly 100, which is not how the mechanic works. Because if that was how the mechanic worked, then that turn would be over. Konamiya would go back to 0, gain a little bit of their attack bar. Our Bastet would gain their attack bar, and then Lauren and Lucian would gain their attack bar, but Lauren would have a higher attack bar than Lucian, and Lauren would take the turn. And that's just not how it happens. So what I believe that it does is that it boosts their attack bar by 100. And why I'm confident in this is because I've tested it. So in this situation, and with these two monsters, if Konamiya uses Resurge on itself, its attack bar would go to 0, and then it would be full at 100. And in those scenarios, yes, Lauren does take the next turn. However, if Konamiya uses that Resurge, it goes back to 0, and uses it, say, on the Lucian, I think it gives Lucian 100 attack bar. Lucian actually now is like way over here at the 139 mark. And so the next turn goes, Lauren increases, Lucian increases, our Bastet increases as we saw, and our Konamiya increases as well. But because Lucian now has a higher attack bar than Lauren, Lucian gets to go, gets reset to 0, and then Lauren would take the next turn, and her attack bar would be like around the 130. Okay, I'm just going to jump in and interrupt myself there. I was trying to finish the video, but I realized there were a couple things I didn't cover. I know it's already a long video, but I should just try to cover them off quickly. So the first thing here is just a chart of how fast you need your monster's total speed in order to move after that tick. The first two are impossible during the current mechanics of the game. However, I do think with artifacts, it is possible now to get a monster at 477 total speed. You would need like a super high base speed monster like a Spectra. You would need a 33% speed lead. You would need basically like a perfect swift, set, and grinded. So we're talking about like plus 35 on each rune, and then plus 42 on the in slot 2. And then you would also need like artifacts, like giving you huge bonuses as well. But I do think it's theoretically possible. Although actually somebody actually ruining a monster in this game that could actually move after tick 3, I'd love to see that monster, like, because the runes on that would just be like totally insane. But that's not the most important thing that we didn't talk about. That was just for your reference. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about that we haven't talked about, which I think is super important, is how does attack bar decreasing skills work. So I think it's pretty clear when a monster has less than 100 attack bar. So if somebody, decreased Bastet by, let's say we'll put it right at 45 to make it easy. Say someone decreased Bastet's attack bar by 10%, then she would go from 45 down to 35. Now, what is interesting is I've sort of set this up in the situation where Bastet moved, she used her skill 3 to boost everybody, and then Konamiya went and used Resurge on our Lucian, so our Lucian is up at like around 180, which is where Lucian actually would be in this scenario. Let's say somehow which is pretty much impossible for a monster to get to, you know, over plus 180 attack bar without having like to cut in at this point. But if theoretically there was a monster that somehow cut in and reduced attack bar. So for instance, let's say that the Konamiya's Resurge also somehow triggered a monster to counterattack, and that counterattack was like an AoE attack bar reduction. But like, let's say that scenario happens, and let's say it even reduced Lucian's attack bar by 1%. What I think, and I'd actually like for someone to either confirm or disprove this, is I think that if you decreased Lucian's in this scenario where Lucian is at plus 100, or not plus, Lucian is at 180 attack speed, if you reduced his attack bar by 1%, I think it would put him at 99. So even though the attack bar increases infinitely every turn until you take a turn, I think that if you're reducing somebody's attack bar, in those cases, you're actually reducing it by potentially even more than what it says, right? Because again, this functionally, like in reality, this Lucian is, you know, moving backwards, you know, from 180 all the way to 99. So he's like losing, you know, 81 in the attack bar number, even though his actual attack bar is only getting reduced 1%. Anyway, that was just a couple of things that I felt like need to be talked about. So what you need to know is time occurs when it looks like nothing is happening, and time occurs like almost instantaneously, and then it pauses, and it's during that pause period that all of the action that we see as action in Summoner's War happens, where you stun somebody, you attack somebody, you heal, you put up a shield, you provoke, you manipulate somebody's attack bar, right? Their attack bar is stagnant, and then it gets manipulated either forwards or backwards, and then time starts again, and that attack bar moves. So figure out what your total attack is for a monster by factoring in all of the things that we talked about over here. So your towers, your base speed, your artifact boost, and your rune stat boost. Use that to figure out your total speed. Use that to figure out how much attack bar is moving during the course of a tick, which is just your attack speed times 0.07 or times 7%. And then that will, if you take your tick speed and just take 100 and divide it by that tick speed, that will tell you how many turns that it takes for you to take your turn. And then you just have to round up, because you can't take a turn at 4.48 ticks. So you have to wait until the end of the 5th tick before the start of the 6th tick before you can go. I have tried my best to explain it. I do think it's complicated. I do think it's a bit counterintuitive, because the time mechanic in Summoner's War works way differently than time in our reality works. So I think it's very counterintuitive, but hopefully that helps explain it and gives you some ideas on how to think about building your teams. If this video was helpful, I will go and try to do a somewhat similar video for the damage, and then if you guys like that, then I'll go ahead and I'll do one for resistance, which will be like very short and simple. Because we actually haven't done any like actual Summoner's War, I'll just demonstrate the mechanic really quickly with the Konamiya and the Lauren to show you that it happens in the way that I had said that it would. So the first one we'll do is we will have Konamiya boost themselves, in which case the turn order should be Bastet, Konamiya, Lauren, Konamiya, Lucian, and then Havana at the end. So attack boost speed, then the Konamiya. We resurge ourselves. The Lauren cuts in ahead of the Konamiya. Oh, and that's gonna, yeah, and then the Konamiya kills, but the Lauren killed, but the Konamiya would be faster than the Lucian or the Bastet. And in this case, we'll test it by using it on the Lucian, and the Lucian will go before the Lauren. So even though Lauren, so as of right now, Konamiya and Lauren are both at over 100 attack bar, and the Lucian isn't, right? So if the Resurge only filled the allies' attack bar up to 100, then the Lauren would take the next turn. I think it adds 100 to whatever the current attack bar position is of the unit, which is why the Lucian cuts the Lauren. So if you're using Resurge on a monster that is basically like not at 0, they have a very, very, very low probability of being cut. So, yeah. There you have it. That's attack, speed, and time in Summer's War. Please leave a comment either way, whether you liked it or you didn't like it. If it was confusing or helpful, I would really like to know. So, hopefully, I'll see you in the next one.